Imagine a story so powerful that it marked the world forever. He was a man whose words and actions transformed history and inspired billions. His name became a symbol of hope, faith, and salvation. But his life holds a deep mystery, a part that raises more questions than answers. Jesus of Nazareth, the most well-documented religious figure in history, has an 18-year void in his story. He appears as a child, astonishing scholars with his wisdom, then vanishes from all records, only to return at 30, fully formed as a teacher, healer, and revolutionary. No one speaks of where he was, what he learned, or how he transformed. Those missing years remain locked away, hidden from history. The absence of these years is more than a simple omission. In ancient times, the life of a great teacher was carefully recorded. Kings, prophets, and philosophers had their journeys, teachings, and struggles documented in great detail. Yet, the most important man to ever walk the earth has a void in his past, an intentional silence that suggests something was erased. Outside of the official scriptures, whispers of another story exist. Ancient writings buried in the sands of time suggest that Jesus traveled far beyond Judea. Some texts claim he studied in Egypt, where the mysteries of the pyramids and the secrets of divine power were guarded by priests. Others point to India and Tibet, where spiritual masters spoke of enlightenment, energy, and the divine power within. In the shadows of history, there are stories of a young man who walked among sages, absorbing the wisdom of forgotten ages. When he reappeared, he was not an ordinary preacher. He spoke of a kingdom not of this world, a power that resided within. His words challenged the religious authorities, threatened the Roman Empire, and promised liberation, not through laws and rituals, but through understanding and awakening. He healed with a touch, commanded nature with his voice, and spoke in parables that contained hidden truths. The authorities feared him, not because he was a man of faith, but because he carried knowledge they could not control. His message was not about blind obedience. It was about breaking free from the systems that bound people in fear. He did not just preach love. He defied those who used religion as a tool of power. Some of his teachings mirror those of ancient wisdom traditions, ones that existed long before his time. Concepts of spiritual energy, the divine within, and transformation of the soul echo the philosophies of distant lands. The idea that the spirit is eternal, that death is an illusion, and that one can transcend suffering are teachings found in mystical traditions across the world. These are not ideas of strict religious law, but of inner awakening. There are fragments of texts hidden away that suggest Jesus was part of a secret movement. The Essenes, a group known for their rejection of mainstream religious authorities, held ancient knowledge passed down from generations before. They lived in the wilderness, practiced rituals of purification, and awaited the arrival of a teacher who would change the course of history. The rulers of the time could not allow this kind of knowledge to spread. If people understood their own divine power, they would not need temples, priests, or laws to dictate their lives. They would not live in fear of earthly kings or religious authorities. They would know that the kingdom of heaven was not in a faraway paradise, but within their very being. In the centuries that followed, texts were lost, rewritten, or deliberately hidden. Entire gospels disappeared, leaving only fragments of a greater truth. The Gospel of Thomas, discovered in the Egyptian desert,
contains sayings of Jesus that never made it into the official Bible. It speaks of enlightenment, of self-discovery, and of a truth that exists beyond written laws. Remember to join our community by subscribing to this channel. The Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient writings preserved in caves, hint at a different understanding of spiritual power. They describe a world where secret knowledge was passed down, where divine messengers walked among men, and where the greatest truths were hidden in plain sight.
His journey did not begin with baptism. His story was not just about miracles and crucifixion. His path led him through distant lands, through hidden schools of wisdom, through teachings that were never meant to reach the masses. And when he returned, he was no longer just a man. He was a force that could not be contained. For thousands of years, religious texts have told of divine beings descending from the heavens, shaping human history and guiding civilization. But what if these accounts were not just myths or symbolic stories? What if the gods described in ancient scriptures were something more? Something not of this earth? Many religious traditions, from the Hebrew Bible to ancient Mesopotamian writings, describe powerful entities who came from above. They were called the Elohim, the Watchers, or the Anunnaki, beings who interacted with humanity, influencing the course of civilizations. Some texts suggest they didn't just guide humans, they may have created them. The original Hebrew word used in Genesis is not a singular God, but Elohim, a plural term that translates to gods, almighty ones. This word suggests that the creation of mankind was not the work of a single entity, but rather a group of advanced beings. The Bible states, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." The use of us and our implies that multiple beings were involved in shaping humanity.
Ancient Sumerian records, which predate the Old Testament, contain nearly identical stories of divine beings who fashioned mankind. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, a race of powerful entities who came from the sky, altering early human life and granting them knowledge. This same pattern appears in nearly every culture. Gods descending, teaching wisdom, and changing the destiny of humankind. The Book of Enoch, an ancient Hebrew text that was removed from the Bible, describes a group called the Watchers, beings who descended to earth and interacted with humans. These Watchers were said to have taught mankind advanced knowledge in astronomy, agriculture, and even war. More disturbingly, they allegedly interbred with humans, creating a race of giants known as the Nephilim.
Mainstream religious teachings often describe angels as purely spiritual beings. Yet these watchers were physical entities capable of interacting with humans, taking wives, and producing offspring. Multiple religious texts describe the Nephilim as beings of immense size and strength, which ancient civilizations feared. Many of his teachings suggest he knew something about divine origins that others did not. His references to the kingdom of heaven were not about a distant paradise, but something already here, something hidden from the common people. In the Gospel of Thomas, one of the lost Gospels that was excluded from the official Bible, Jesus states, "The kingdom of God is inside you and all around you." This idea aligns closely with what mystery schools and secret traditions have taught for centuries, that humanity itself contains divine power, but has been kept in ignorance. The Bible also suggests there were conflicts among these divine beings. The Old Testament describes battles between Yahweh and other gods, warning his followers not to worship them.
The book of Psalms even states, God stands in the assembly of the gods. He judges among the gods. This could potentially clarify why people view Jesus as so dangerous. He wasn't just challenging the political and religious authorities. He was revealing a truth older than human history. If humanity was created or altered by a higher intelligence, then Jesus' real message may have been about breaking free from the spiritual control imposed by those beings. In the ancient world, civilizations thrived under the guidance of what they believed were divine beings. The Egyptians worshipped Osiris and Ra. The Greeks honored Zeus and Apollo, and the Sumerians spoke of the mighty Anunnaki. These weren't just separate mythologies. They were versions of the same story, retold through different lenses. In the Hebrew Bible, Yahweh is depicted as the primary deity of Israel, but there are numerous references to other gods who were worshipped alongside him. In Psalms, it states, God stands in the assembly of the gods. He gives judgment among the gods. Ancient inscriptions and Canaanite texts reveal that Yahweh was originally one of many gods in the region. The Hebrews, influenced by surrounding cultures, gradually elevated Yahweh above the others. Over time, monotheism was enforced, and other deities, once widely acknowledged, were erased from religious doctrine. This transformation wasn't unique to Judaism. Christianity followed the same pattern, adopting older traditions while discarding elements that didn't align with the new religious order. The early church removed texts, reinterpreted scriptures, and suppressed alternative beliefs that could challenge the growing power of its leaders. Jesus' teachings were radical for his time. He didn't align himself with the temple priests, nor did he enforce rigid laws. Instead, he spoke about inner divinity, direct connection to the divine, and spiritual freedom, concepts that echo much older mystical traditions. His words often mirrored teachings found in Hinduism, Buddhism, and other ancient wisdom schools. The idea that the kingdom of heaven is within and that people are capable of reaching divine enlightenment without religious intermediaries is not a new concept. These teachings existed in Egypt, India, and Greece long before Jesus' time.
What made his message so dangerous was that it challenged the religious elite. He bypassed the need for priests, sacrifices, and rigid laws. Instead of a God demanding strict obedience, he spoke of a divine presence that existed in everyone. This was a direct threat to organized religion, which thrived on controlling access to the divine. This trend isn't just a Christian phenomenon. The pattern of concealing knowledge and rewriting history exists across various religions. In Hinduism, early texts describe multiple gods and cosmic beings, but later, interpretations focus on a more singular divine force. In Islam, alternative interpretations of the Quran have been silenced to maintain religious unity. In Buddhism, secret teachings of enlightenment were reserved for only a select few. The recurring theme is control, limiting spiritual knowledge to prevent the masses from discovering their own divine potential. One of the most startling omissions from the Bible is the pre-existence of Jesus. Certain ancient texts describe Jesus as a being of immense wisdom before his human life, possibly linked to other divine entities that influenced early civilizations. This suggests that he may have carried knowledge from a far more ancient source than Judaism or Christianity. There are also hints in scripture that Jesus was aware of other divine beings, possibly even referencing the Watchers, the Nephilim, or other celestial forces. If he knew about these entities,
It would explain why his mission was so urgent. He wasn't just teaching people to love one another. He was trying to reveal a suppressed reality about the nature of the divine. The enforcement of monotheism, the suppression of ancient texts, and the removal of spiritual wisdom all point to a deliberate effort to keep humanity in ignorance. If people understood the true origins, their inner power, and the cosmic knowledge that predates all religions, they would no longer submit to religious and political authority. Are you enjoying the story? Support our channel by clicking the subscribe button. The religious leaders of his time viewed him as a threat. He spoke of a direct connection between humans and the divine, removing the need for intermediaries like priests and rituals. He rejected the rigid laws that governed society, exposing their corruption and hypocrisy. The Pharisees and Sadducees, who held control over religious life, saw his message as an attack on their authority. They sought to silence him, not because he preached peace, but because he exposed a system designed to enslave minds. Beyond religion, the Roman Empire had its own reasons to fear him. A man who taught that the true kingdom was not of this world challenged their rule. If people realized they were not bound by the laws and expectations of earthly rulers, control would crumble. Crucifixion was not simply a method of execution. It was a statement, a warning to anyone who dared to defy the empire's grasp. Even after his death, the battle to control his message continued. In the centuries that followed, Rome took over Christianity, transforming it from a radical movement into a tool for governing the masses. Emperor Constantine ensured that only select texts were preserved, eliminating writings that could undermine the church's growing influence. Obedience replaced enlightenment, and faith became synonymous with submission rather than awakening. The Vatican, the keeper of religious knowledge, holds an archive filled with secrets that could rewrite history. Ancient manuscripts, lost gospels, and hidden records remain locked away from public view. The information within these walls could reveal the missing years of Jesus, the real origins of Christian doctrine, and the suppressed wisdom of civilizations that came before. Throughout history, secret societies have carried fragments of forbidden knowledge. The Essenes, known for their mysterious practices, may have held teachings that Jesus himself studied. The Gnostics believed that salvation came not through blind faith, but through knowledge of the divine within. The Knights Templar, accused of heresy, were rumored to possess documents that challenged the authority of the church. The suppression of these groups was not a coincidence. It was an effort to erase alternative paths to enlightenment. The manipulation of belief is not limited to ancient times. Modern institutions continue to use fear and control to shape the way people think. People have waged wars in the name of religion, not for spiritual purposes, but to consolidate power and influence. Governments enact laws based on moral codes designed to regulate human behavior, ensuring compliance with a system that benefits the elite. The original message of Jesus was one of personal empowerment. He spoke of the divine force residing within every person, the ability to break free from illusion, and the power of consciousness to shape reality. His teachings echoed the wisdom of ancient traditions across the world. Ideas found in Eastern philosophy, Egyptian mysticism, and esoteric knowledge long before his time. The kingdom of God was not a distant paradise, but an inner awakening, hidden beneath layers of deception. What remains today is a distorted version of the truth, The greatest fear of those in power is an awakened humanity, capable of thinking beyond the boundaries imposed by religious and political structures. The erasure of history, the destruction of sacred texts, and the persecution of those who seek truth are all part of a strategy to keep people confined to a carefully constructed reality. The story of Jesus is one of the most well documented in history, yet there is a huge gap in his life that remains a complete mystery. Between the ages of 12 and 30, the Bible is silent about his whereabouts and what he was doing. These missing 18 years have led to countless theories, some rooted in history, others in legend. Could Jesus have simply lived an ordinary life in Nazareth? Or was he traveling the world, learning sacred wisdom from ancient masters? Clues hidden in ancient texts and traditions suggest that he may have studied with different spiritual groups, gaining knowledge that shaped his later teachings. The traditional belief is that Jesus spent these years living quietly in Nazareth, working as a carpenter alongside his father, Joseph. The Gospel of Luke briefly mentions that he grew in wisdom and stature, but there are no detailed accounts of this time in the Bible. If he had stayed in one place, wouldn't there be stories from his neighbors, family, or local records about him? The fact that there is nothing suggests that either his life was too uneventful to record, which seems unlikely for someone who would later become the most influential figure in history, or that important details were lost or removed. Some researchers believe Jesus spent these years with the Essenes, a Jewish sect that lived in Qumran, near the Dead Sea. The Essenes were not like other Jewish groups. They practiced strict purification rituals, studied sacred texts intensely, and believed in the coming of a great teacher, a Messiah. One of the most intriguing theories suggests that Jesus traveled to India, Nepal, and Tibet, where he studied under Buddhist and Hindu monks. Ancient texts from Tibet speak of a teacher named Isa, described as a holy man from the West who arrived and learned their wisdom before returning to his homeland. In India, spiritual teachings revolved around meditation and enlightenment, healing through spiritual energy, non-violence, and compassion toward all living beings. Many of Jesus' later teachings mirror these concepts. He spoke about turning the other cheek, loving one's enemies, and the power of prayer and fasting, all ideas found in Buddhist and Hindu philosophy. If Jesus spent years in the East, he may have brought back knowledge that shaped his revolutionary message. Egypt had long been a center of advanced knowledge, where priesthoods guarded ancient spiritual secrets. As a child, Jesus had already lived in Egypt with his family after fleeing King Herod's persecution. Some believe that as he grew older, he returned to study in the temples, learning about sacred geometry and the mysteries of the universe. Spiritual healing and the power of sound and vibration. Alchemy, the transformation of the self and the world. The Egyptian priesthoods trained initiates in deep wisdom that only a few could understand. If Jesus studied in those temples, he may have gained the hidden knowledge of the pharaohs, which later allowed him to perform miracles, heal the sick, and even control natural forces. For centuries, the story of Jesus has been passed down, shaping the faith of billions. His message of love, forgiveness, and spiritual awakening has endured, but a crucial part of his life remains a mystery deliberately left untold. The missing 18 years, a gap that should contain some of the most transformative moments of his journey, have been erased from religious texts, leaving behind only questions and fragments of hidden knowledge. The absence of these years is not an accident. Powerful institutions have long sought to control the narrative, ensuring that the only version of history that survives is one that serves their authority, their doctrines, and their power over people's beliefs. The idea that Jesus may have traveled far beyond Judea, learned sacred wisdom from distant cultures, and returned with knowledge that defied religious structures is something they could never allow to be known. How could the most influential teacher in history simply disappear for nearly 2 decades without any mention from family, neighbors, or historical sources? A life spent solely as a carpenter does not explain the depth of his wisdom, his revolutionary ideas, or the abilities he demonstrated when he re-emerged. If he had trained with the Essenes, his rejection of traditional religious laws and his emphasis on a direct connection with the divine make perfect sense. His focus on purity, spiritual enlightenment, and rejecting the corruption of religious elites closely mirrors their beliefs. His opposition to the temple priests, his use of parables to teach hidden truths, and his vision of a new spiritual kingdom all suggest that he was influenced by something greater than the standard teachings of his time. If he had traveled to India or Tibet, his teachings of peace, meditation, and universal love are deeply aligned with Buddhist and Hindu traditions. He spoke of turning the other cheek, loving one's enemies, and transcending earthly suffering, concepts that were foreign to Jewish law but fundamental to Eastern philosophy. His ability to perform healings, control nature, and teach the power of faith mirrors the techniques of ancient yogis and spiritual masters who had long understood the secrets of the mind and body. If you are enjoying this story, consider clicking Super Thanks. Your support helps uncover hidden truths and spread knowledge that challenges the narrative. If he had studied in Egypt, his understanding of sacred knowledge, energy, and spiritual transformation could explain the miraculous acts he later performed. The hidden knowledge of the pharaohs, passed down through generations of high priests, was believed to grant initiates the ability to manipulate matter, time, and even life itself. The pyramids, aligned with celestial forces, were more than tombs. They were centers of ancient wisdom that held the keys to divine power. All of these possibilities point to one undeniable truth. Jesus knew something that the world was not meant to understand. After his crucifixion, the fight over his message intensified. His real teachings, the ones that might have revealed where he had been, what he had learned, and what his true mission was, were quickly altered, reshaped, and in many cases, removed entirely. The early church leaders, working alongside political rulers, crafted a version of his life that fit their agenda, ensuring that people remained dependent on religious institutions rather than seeking their own spiritual power. The Gospels that were left out of the Bible, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and many others, presented a different Jesus. The teacher emphasized self-discovery, direct communion with the divine, and the capacity to awaken one's true potential. These were not messages of control, but of freedom. A dangerous idea to those who thrived on obedience and submission. The Vatican archives, locked away from public access, may contain the missing records that detail where Jesus traveled, who he learned from, and what he truly knew. But these revelations would challenge centuries of religious authority. Thanks for watching. Join our community by subscribing to this channel. Until the next video.